helpful to you to write this down for Monday if you did not. But we're going to review these super quick, and then we'll move on, and we might finish history today. That'd be really cool.
Did you write it down?
217 in your books. What were some of the dates that we talked about on Monday?
1935, 1939,
Okay, so 1935, let's see these one at a time. 1935, what did we say about that?
National membership exceeds 100,000.
So in 1935, our national membership exceeded 100,000. So it started in 28 with 33. It ended, or not ended, but it made it to 35 less than 10 years later with 100,000. Like, what even growth percentage is that? That's crazy. So I thought that was just kind of a fun fact that we exceeded that in that small amount of time. In 1935, what else happened?
The NFA was founded.
Yeah, the NFA was founded. So the NFA stood for what? New Farmers of America. It was founded in Tuskegee, Alabama. They elected David Simmons as the national NFA president. What was the New Farmers of America?
It was for Black people.
Yeah, it was the FFA basically, but it was for our African American friends. And again, to reiterate, that wasn't being racist, that wasn't being exclusive. That was being in the 1930s, way before a lot of our social justice, our equality, what did we call that time? Civil rights, our civil rights movements, before any type of segregation happened. I mean, our friends who were African American were still going to different schools. They were still drinking out of separate water fountains. They were still riding different buses. And so it wasn't anything bad at the organization. It was just kind of the time. So they created this kind of sister organization. They wore jackets that were black corduroy with gold, which is kind of cool. Yeah.
I already wrote that one down. We already go over it.
I think we did. I think you guys were a little bit ahead of the other class, so I just started back. We backstepped then because I low-key forgot this one, but in 1929, the Ohio FFA Association was established. So this was basically saying in 28, the National Association was established, and then a lot of states followed it at different times. And so 29, Ohio FFA was established. In 1939, and jumping back up, the Cardington FFA was established, and we got our charter. So this over here is a super old document that basically charters us as an official chapter of the State Association of the National Organization. So it was our official first birthday. And last year, in 2019, we celebrated our 80th birthday, and I gave everybody a cupcake, and we sang happy birthday to the chapter, and we had a party. And also, we watched that video. So if you guys didn't get to see that on Monday, if you didn't go back and watch it, we made a really cool video to tribute to our chapter. Last year, the officer team put it together, and I highly recommend a watch. In 1942, your bell ringer, Ohio FFA Camp Muskegon was established. It is one of 7 FFA camps across the country. Georgia has one, New York has one. I think those are kind of the big 3. So really cool opportunity that we have in Ohio. This is my favorite place in the world. It's happier than Disney World. I promise. Straight up, go to camp. Nobody is in a bad mood at FFA camp.
But everybody in our chapter go?
You can. We don't limit it. So we take as many people as would like to.
Wait, I was
Is it open
about
this
that.
year?
Yeah, I'll show you
Hopefully.
that.
We don't know. They haven't said anything yet. But what? Future Farmers. Last year they did one like mini session in July. We were not permitted to travel overnight yet as a school district, so we could not participate. But in 1944, the Future Farmers of America Foundation is formed, and that's literally its own separate entity. It's not tied to the organization, but it is created basically to raise money and work with sponsors to raise money for the FFA. Fun fact, FFA had to majorly adapt its operation through World War II. 260,450 FFA members served in World War II. That's a crazy number, right? Like, that's an insane number of members who actually served in the war. 7,188 paid the ultimate sacrifice and gave their life for our country. And that's just FFA members. That's not like citizens. Like, that is people who were high school students wearing the blue jacket, went overseas and served in the war. So that's a part of why patriotism is such a big value in our organization, why we say the pledge in our meetings, why that's our official salute, why we're proud of our country and the freedom to literally pick and believe and think and feel whatever it is that we want to pick and believe and think and feel. So,
Do we write that one down?
yeah. Can we just off like margins or something? In 1948, a huge membership increase. Over 10,000 people attended the National FFA convention, so they actually had just a municipal auditorium booked, and there were too many people to stay. So they literally, FFA found a whole bunch of cots and put them in the basement, and that's where the FFA members slept for the convention. So like, what a giant slumber party. Sounds so fun, right? And then in 1948, National FFA Week, or National FFA celebrated its first National FFA Week. They built it around George Washington's birthday, which is close to President's Day. So it's in February. That would have been on the 20th anniversary of FFA. And we celebrate that every year since. Is that cool? Questions? Okay. So we're going to keep talking history. That was kind of a crash course from what we talked about on Monday. So if you didn't get some of that stuff, I would still highly suggest going back and watching that video.
Sorry,
from
I missed that. Could you say
Siri.
it again, please?
No, I'm not talking to
Okay.
you. But highly suggest going back and watching that video so that you're caught up with everything that you need to know.
Okay, we're gonna go out of order here because I don't feel like
Okay, you guys ready for the next one? Ah! So exciting. Okay. In 1950, a little 2-year jump, the 81st U.S. Congress. So again, this is big stuff, right? Like this is the United States Senate and the United States House of Representatives. Like this is not just like Cardington being like, this is a cool idea, let's do it. Like this is like the United States government, right? So Congress passed a bill that was come to be known as Public Law 740. So if you think about it, 740 is like a lot of our area codes. So Public Law 81740, and what that did was it granted a federal charter to the FFA, to Future Farmers of America. It was signed by President Harry S. Truman. Okay. So literally our club, our organization was so cool that a United States president had something on their desk that said, hey, let's make FFA super official, right? So how cool is that? I just think that's really neat. So that was the official federal government charter recognizing Future Farmers of America as a national organization. At that time, and you don't necessarily need to write this down, but I want you to soak in what I say in this sentence, okay? At that time, FFA was in all 48 states. What's crazy about that?
there wasn't 50 states yet.
There literally weren't 50 states in the United States yet.
Like Hawaii and Alaska and everything.
Correct. So we only had 48 United States of America. So FFA has been around longer than we have had 50 states.
Bro, 70 years ago, Alaska and Hawaii like one of the things in the U.S.
They were a thing, but they weren't a part of the U.S. At that time, Puerto Rico and Hawaii were territories. Hawaii later became a state. Alaska also, I think we bought it from Russia.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy though? It's been around that long. Like to think about that, like in the time lapse of like history, that FFA was founded before World War II. Like literally,
That's crazy.
kind of FFA was founded like before / right in the midst of the Great Depression. So the amount of things that historically have happened while FFA has been a thing, like the FFA members have experienced.
Wait, what does that say? 81 through what?
81-740. In 1952, FFA said, we have so many people, we should have a way to communicate with them. So they created a magazine, and they called it the National Future Farmer. gotten any New Horizons magazines at your house?
I got a Smithsonian one.
You haven't gotten any FFA magazines to your house? You should be. That's weird. I'll check. But they publish it and they would send it to every FFA member so you could keep up on FFA news. In 1953, we started a trend, okay? So then a president, Dwight Schrute, just kidding. Then President Dwight D. Eisenhower spoke at the National FFA Convention.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah, that's crazy. So literally our organization was big enough and honored enough that the President of the United States felt the need to come and speak at it. Like, how many things does the president go and speak at that aren't like government related? Not a crazy amount, right? Unless it's like a rally or something that's government related. There's not a lot of things that the presidents necessarily are like going around just giving speeches, right? I mean, a little bit, but not a lot. So the fact that the president of the United States said, I want to go to that convention, I want to talk to those young people who are interested in agriculture, they're doing good things in the FFA, I want to be there, right? The president of the United States said that. So super cool. Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first person to do that, there's a list of about 10 that followed suit. So we're actually going to keep a list over here of the presidents who have spoken at the National Convention.
We're gonna hate on the ones. Yeah, right.
Wait, where are we putting this?
I'm just going to keep a list over here so that each day it stays there.
Yeah, do we put all of these?
We might. Maybe not. Okay, other cool fact that you don't have to write down, but in 1955, so there's an award that's called the American Star Farmer. Basically, that's out of saying everybody who either raises crops or animals as their SAE project, okay, owns their own crops or animals and sells them. Out of all of the people in the country who have crops and animals or have their own business, that person is the best in the country. It's a huge award to get. So the American Star Farmer was actually published. They were their picture was on the cover of Time magazine. His name was Joe Moore. He was the 1955 American Star Farmer. But how crazy is that? And FFA member's picture was on the cover of Time magazine, which is like a huge magazine. This is so huge, guys. It's really cool.
Wild.
In 1957, Harry S. Truman spoke at the convention. He was also a president, right? But he was a former president at that time. But he was also the guy who signed our federal charter. So we like Truman and the FFA. In 1959, the National FFA headquarters was dedicated, or the National FFA Center, sorry. They said we need a building that we can keep all of our stuff headquartered at. We can send these national magazines. We can do this national convention stuff. We have a national headquarters, a National FFA Center. It was built in Alexandria, Virginia. On part of George Washington's estate. So again, let's think about this. Like literally George Washington, okay, his farm, they said, you know what, FFA, you're pretty cool. We're going to give you some of George Washington's land to build your center on.
That's
Like,
actually really cool.
What? How? Who else? How does that happen? Like the George Washington, the first president of the entire United States. We're going to give you a chunk of his land. Build your center, right? That's crazy. So the first National FFA Center was built in Alexandria, Virginia, on part of George Washington's estate, which is crazy cool. Okay. An FFA camp had been on that land before, but sorry about that. In 1965, something really big happened for our organization. I was right, 1695. The NFA merged the FFA. Okay, so the new Farmers of America joined forces with the future Farmers of America. What was happening in the 1960s? Who was president?
Avery.
What?
Wait a
What?
second. Good job.
In the 1960s, not the 1860s. In the 1960s, who was president?
Is that an S?
I thought it was like Pete Roosevelt or something.
A little bit after Roosevelt.
Wait, is it S's?
Kennedy was
It's
elected
no,
in
but
1963.
wait, shot.
Oh, 62. He was shot. He did get shot. Yes, he got assassinated. On what I believe was November 23rd, 1963, in a caravan in Dallas.
Yeah.
Yep.
My man got sniped.
Bro, all the presidents that have gotten assassinated were elected 100 years apart.
No, just Abraham Lincoln and JFK.
Oh,
There's three
I
presidents.
thought there was another one that like was 100 years apart too.
No, I
That
saw a
wouldn't be
thing that
possible.
it was
Dude,
like
US has been
every
around
something, all those presidents were assassinated and the others
Yeah.
weren't.
There's like a conspiracy theory.
There is a conspiracy theory, but the big conspiracy is between Lincoln and JFK, because like a lot of the stuff for their presidency is very similar too.
Yeah.
But there's been 3 presidents to be assassinated, 4 I think with an assassination attempt, because Reagan was shot but survived. So NFA merged with the FFA. So in 1965, it increased membership by more than 50,000. So in a single year, because NFA members became FFA members. So at that time, Kennedy was president. That was right around the time, I don't know, I Have a Dream speech was given in like 60, I think Martin Luther King was assassinated in 68 by Sir Hans Sirhan.
So what?
That was the name. Or maybe that's who assassinated RFK.
Wait, I thought JFK was early.
JFK was assassinated in 1963. I believe Martin Luther King Jr. and his brother Robert Kennedy were both assassinated in 1968. So
I just always thought it was earlier because I always remember my great grandmother was like, she was little when that whole thing happened, but she was born in like 1960. She was like 90 something when she died.
Where did MLK, like, where did he die?
I know RFK was assassinated in a hotel kitchen in California, and he was killed by Sir Hans Sirhan.
Wow. That's a crappy place to die.
Yeah. They were trying to get him away because they heard that somebody was trying to shoot him, so they were like hustling him through the kitchen, and they were like, haha, surprise. That's right. MLK, I should know where he was shot, but
Didn't
got shot on a
someone
balcony.
blow up his house?
I thought he
No.
got shot on a balcony.
that was Lincoln. At Ford's Theater.
Ford's Theater.
He wasn't in the. Oh yeah, he was on the balcony in the.
Bro, let's just
I was
ask
like, he was
Siri.
not on the balcony.
so anyways,
everything.
yeah, you can
She was there.
In the 1960s, you say I was there?
But Siri was
Oh.
there.
In the 1960s,
Wow.
civil rights was going on. Desegregation was happening, right? Schools were being merged together. And so we also went ahead and brought that sister organization in with us. In 1968, Nixon spoke at the National Convention. Okay. And at that time, he was actually just a presidential candidate. So he was running for office. Convention is in the fall. The presidential election is in the fall. He spoke at the National FFA Convention, and a month later was elected as United States president. Fun fact, every presidential candidate who has spoken at the National Convention went on to get elected.
Coincidence? I think
Trump
not.
should have talked at the national.
He did.
Oh, he did?
Trump did?
That's what
Before he
I
was
was
elected?
He spoke just after he was elected, but Mike Pence spoke at the convention. He spoke as the governor of Indiana at the time because the national convention's in Indiana, so he came and did like a welcome. But at the time, he was also the vice presidential candidate. And then like the next week, they were elected.
So basically, if I want to be president,
Speak at the national convention. Formula. So Nixon spoke at that convention in 1968 and got elected the following month. In 1969, this was a big year for us. And in 1969, membership was open to women. Okay. So it made possible for them to hold office, compete at events, go to national levels of things. They were allowed official membership, allowed the blue jacket of the FFA in 1969. Women were allowed it. So last year we just celebrated the 50th anniversary of women in the FFA. And since then, women hold about 51% of leadership positions, which is kind of cool. For my chicas out there in the crowd. In Memphis.
Memphis, Tennessee.
In 68. So, 1969, women were allowed in the FFA. Prior to women being allowed official membership, we kind of mentioned this on Monday. Prior to women being allowed official membership, they were granted what some people would call FFA sweethearts or FFA queens. So it depended on your chapter what they called it, but they started where they would find one female a year, and the boys would go and they'd take her a bunch of roses and they'd ask her to be their sweetheart, right? Some fraternities still do that on college campuses if you guys have ever seen that on Instagram and stuff. But they would ask her to be the sweetheart. She would come to FFA meetings. A lot of the time she would prepare refreshments for the meetings. My grandma was never officially a sweetheart, but she had a piece of sheet music and she would go to the FFA meetings and play. They had an FFA song, which I really want to try and get somebody to play because I still have that sheet music, which is cool. But she would play the music at the beginning of the meetings on the pianos for them.
Jason's really good at playing piano.
Are you? Maybe I'll bring him that music. We'll get a little video.
Jay's
Jay's really good at playing piano.
It's really good.
For chicken.
Yes, he could be the FFA sweethearts. He's not actually in FFA. but
There we
he's
go.
not.
But they would ask women to be these sweethearts and they would play just different roles throughout the year. The sweethearts would get a white corduroy jacket. So if you guys have ever seen one, Tess's grandma was an FFA sweetheart. So if you watch that video that we watched on Monday on YouTube, you see Tess like looking at her grandma's jacket and her grandma's picture. And so that's kind of cool. We did FFA Queens at Cardington. They got like their tiara and stuff too, but keep that head high, girl. Don't drop it down. But we did FFA Queens, but they would get those white jackets and be allowed to do some things, but they weren't allowed to be officers. They weren't allowed to compete at events or do any other things with membership. So they changed that in 1969 and said, you know what? You can be official members. Super cool. Love it. Questions?
We did have a class. It's like nap.
Can I use the restroom, please?
It's like,
No.
all right, going to my napping class.
See, nap class should be before lunch too. They should,
Or
I feel like
right
I'm like the
Or right
most
after
tired.
lunch when
Yeah.
you're full. Yeah, that's
Or
just don't
if
take a
it
nap.
was before, then like you take a nap during all your like.
Chloe
work
takes a nap every day.
classes,
I take naps often. Yes.
Miss Wallace, can I use the restroom?
Also in 1969, WLC was established. So WLC stands for the Washington Leadership Conference. And so that is a conference that every year, members from all across the country for 7 weeks, there's 7 week-long conferences. For 7 weeks, they can meet in Washington, D.C., and it's a national leadership conference. They learn about being good leaders, being good advocates, but they get to meet with congressmen. They get to tour the monuments. They get to go to some museums and stuff and see D.C., but also be a part of that national conference. Usually you're roomed with people from other states, so they try not to put 2 people from the same state in the same room. So you get to meet really cool friends from across the country. Fun fact, if you want to go, you're always welcome to, but we pay for the president and vice president every year to attend WLC. So if that's a goal that you've had, just kind of a perk that goes with that office, that then you get a free trip so you can come back and lead our chapter, lead the officer team through the next year. So again, you're welcome to go. You do have to pay your own way if you're not in those positions, but perk of earning that member of that office is that you get that trip. And we go to this really great steakhouse. It's called Fogo de Chao. Daniel Kill cried when he tried the steak because it was that good. Like legitimate tear, like rolling down his face.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's really good. In 1973, a guy named Fred McClure, do not think he was related to Merrick, was elected the National FFA Secretary. And we've always had a National FFA Secretary. So what was really special about this was that he was the first African American to hold national office. So he was the first African American in a national office in general, and he was elected to the National FFA Secretary. So Fred McClure. In 1974, Gerald Ford spoke at the National Convention. What was he?
He was a president. Right?
He was a president, yep. And Gerald Ford was, his speech in 1974 at the National FFA Convention was actually broadcasted live on television. So again, not only is there a president at the National Convention, but it's broadcasted on national TV. So like flipping through the channels, wow, it's the FFA Convention.
That's crazy.
Guys, you're part of such a big organization. It's so cool.
Yay.
In 1975, this is a dude you need to remember. Okay.
Well, dude,
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy.
why did I spell Jimmy?
Changed it.
I was just thinking that.
Spoke at the convention. Okay. Jimmy Carter spoke at the National FFA Convention. He was a presidential candidate. So what happened to him? He became president the next year. Because it wasn't an election year. He spoke. Okay. Jimmy Carter is super important to us because he is the only United States president who was an FFA member.
Oh.
So really, if you think about it, 70s were probably about the first time that could really happen because you have to be 35 to be president. You would have had to have been 18, or you would have been 16 in 1920. So really, 1948 would have been the first year that a previous member could have been president, right? Because a member who was in high school would have had to wait till they were 35. So 75, Jimmy Carter was, and he still to this day is the only former FFA member to serve as the United States president. Okay, so he's our dude. Okay. He was from the Plains FFA chapter in Georgia. Okay, Georgia boys love apparently being advocates for our organization and FFA members. He was an FFA member from the Plains FFA chapter in Georgia. Okay.
Please pardon the interruption. Just wanted to remind everyone there is a Spanish club meeting today during lunch. Thank you.
He served as the secretary of his chapter. Okay, let's finish this and you guys can head out. He served as the secretary of his chapter. So imagine not even getting elected president of your FFA chapter and then being like, haha, president of the United States. Like, take that, right? So President Plains, or he was the secretary of the Plains FFA chapter in Georgia. His SAE project was peanut farming. So for all of y'all searching for one, at some point Jimmy Carter, President of the United States, sat down and said, I have to plan my SAE project. Well, he was a peanut farmer.
That's kind of cool. I'd like to be a peanut farmer.
And he maintained that he was a peanut farmer when he got elected President of the United States. Next fun fact about him, okay, is that Jimmy Carter's FFA jacket.
Oh no, wrong.
It's in the FFA Hall of Fame thing. Museum thing.
His FFA FFA jacket currently hangs in the Smithsonian Museum of American History.
Ooh.
So literally,
Isn't that like an important thing?
yeah, it's like the National Museum
Yeah.
in DC. Yeah. So like literally, there are FFA jackets. There are stuff from your guys' organization that hangs in the Smithsonian Museum of American History. What a big deal! Like it's such a big deal, guys, that you are a member of this. There's 5 or 7 jackets that currently hang in the Smithsonian. There's a whole like exhibit about FFA.
That's pretty cool.
So cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So,